True 10 is brought to you by SA's newest top realtor, Karen Vasquez of Caldwell Banker. Karen is a local educator, mother, wife, and certified realtor that wants to help you find your new forever home.
I don't blame you.
Nice.
Start at the beginning.
Okay.
How did you end up in law enforcement? How did you end up at the Bexar County
Sure.
and being a constable?
Well, gosh, since I was a little kid, all I ever thought about was just, being a police officer. So I think my youngest memory, I probably was about like 9 or 10.
Uh-huh.
And I know I just kind of blurted out to my younger sister, and she kind of giggled because we were kids at the time. She's like, yeah, okay. But yeah, it was just in me as a very young kid. And so eventually I, grew up, met my husband, got married, and then I actually went to school. I was in college, but then I decided to go ahead and study for paralegal. So
Nice.
I finished that course off and became a mom, did my stay-home mom, raised the kids, but law enforcement was still there. So I was like, okay, so I was in my early 30s and I decided, you know what, I'm going to go in law enforcement. And my husband supported me.
Yeah.
So I went in, graduated, came out, and gosh, it was like right around Christmas time. I went down to Austin, we took the test, and then there was a 2-week time period that we had to wait for the new year to kick in before we were officially, considered graduates, the process. And well, then it was time to actually look for a position, right, as a police officer, which was exciting, new, nervous, the whole works. Every emotion you can think of is in it. And I went and applied over with the Bexar County Sheriff Department. So I went in as a reserve deputy. So basically what I did is donated all my time, whatever hours, that I wanted to put in to learn the process of the training on the street and so forth. And you don't get paid for that. It's completely just, they hold your commission for you. So it's official, through all the documentation with the state and so forth. And then you're able to go out into the field with officers, right? And you learn everything. I mean, from the bottom to as much as you know on the street. And I loved it. I really, really loved it. But at the same time, I also noticed that it was a challenge for a woman or any woman in a male-dominated field. It was tough. So it was overseeing what they thought was the right way to do things versus the truly right way. But when it came from a woman, it was like, no, that's not how we do things. So I experienced a little bit of that too. And then of course I experienced the officers that were open and, wanting to work with another officer, not just a female. So we had both. But as far as supervisory roles, I think that's where I probably felt it most was, men not understanding that a woman can bring so much also to the table. And that was just something that they still weren't really willing to open up all the way with. And it was crazy because here we are in the 2000s and, so I kept working there. I loved it. I got a call from a friend that had joined the constable's office, right? And he was like, hey, you know what? I told everybody about you and, they want to meet you. You're very dedicated. You're one of those get-goers. Get out there and you learn as much as you can. And I was just like, oh, I don't know about the constables. I really love the sheriff's office, right? So then I get a call from a supervisor over the constable's office here in Bexar County. And he was like, hey, I've heard so many good things about you. Would you at least consider coming and interviewing with us? and just riding along and seeing, what we offer here, right? Because it's another part of law enforcement, because right now, you're out doing the criminal process
Right.
of it, but we offer, the statutory process of it, as well as the constitutional process. So you'll get to learn a lot more. So I kind of just rode it around, and I was like, you know what? I think I'm just going to go for it and learn something new. Why not, right? So I winded up going over there, and sure enough, I winded up being commissioned by this constable's office here in Bexar County, and I loved it. I didn't expect what I saw,
Right,
and
right.
so it was really something I just loved. So I stayed there for a long time. I did step away at one point to go work for municipality just to see what that part was about, and if I kind of really, which way direction did I really want to
Right.
go. I wanted to be open to learn everything, but the constables pulled me back, and I eventually just winded up over at Precinct 2, another constable's office, and I stayed there as, reserve deputy for a while. And I saw so many things that I thought, wait a minute, I think that they needed to be addressed. And so it took me back to me being out in the field,
Right.
gosh, just learning and seeing what the community was addressing with us as law enforcement on the street. There was so much more, that was going on with law enforcement, the communication, the trust, and so many issues. And so I said, you know what? I think I'm going to look at how I could be, bring something more to the table where I'm able to engage more on a one-on-one with the community or community members, and then effectively put that back into the office. So that's when I decided to go and talk with my husband and my family, and decide to run for the elected position of Bexar County Constable Precinct 2.
That's a big
Yeah.
role, and that was a big commitment for you.
It really was. It was a big commitment, but again, to just, I have young children that were growing up, and I also got to witness a lot of young children getting, going through our criminal justice system.
Right.
And was there other programs, or what can we do, or what can we offer to the young generation? That way, some guidance, or maybe, just showing them that law enforcement can be so much more than just putting handcuffs on somebody and taking you down, and booking you. So yeah, there's a lot of factors that went into that.
Once you were elected, you were there for 3 years?
Yeah, about 3 years.
Okay. And then you made your announcement for sheriff. You brought up whole woman and Hispanic leadership role in being in Precinct 2. Do you think that really was a big hamper on it, and you being able to do what you wanted to do?
Right.
Or do you think people took that in a wrong way?
Not so much of the community. I mean, really, if I backed up a little bit, when we decided to campaign, I was actually going out door to door. I literally walked myself with my family and my kids, and we were knocking.
And I know you had quite a few constituents and people that really supported you and were there for you.
They really were. And so we got the feedback of what they wanted in a constable, and what issues they saw at Bexar County Constable Precinct 2, and what needed to be addressed. Not only did I know what was going on, but I also wanted to know if the community was aware too, of if there need to be changes or not. And so so we continued that. But during the process of actually campaigning, I was approached at one time, and because Bexar County is very politics.
Oh, yes.
In Bexar County. Yeah, very politics.
It is.
And so, it was brought to my attention that I needed to drop out of the race, because I wasn't the one that they wanted for that position. And, my response was like, you know what, with the help of my constituents, I'll see you at the end of the race where we win, because this is about them, right? This has nothing to do with politics. And I was fresh. I had no connections to politics as far as the politic world. And I didn't plan to ever be involved in that portion, as far as things that transpire behind doors that the community doesn't get to see. And so we continued, and going into the office day one, I pretty much went in there and we began working of what the constituents want. And I believe within a day or two, I was already on TV, literally I was on TV and I was like, oh my gosh. And I think the first story that aired was something about one of my command staff actually wasn't a real police officer or something like that. So I was like, oh my goodness, which was false.
Right.
So that is something that we experienced, or I experienced from that point on to the end of my term, was the news outlet reporting of a certain station here in this county that wasn't producing facts of what actually was transpiring.
So the media, I mean, it really did take off after the initial investigation started. And I'll be honest, like when I heard the story, I was like, this is very interesting. And I just couldn't put my finger on it then at the time. Of course, now I'm like, oh, well, no wonder. But the media really did showcase you as someone who may not have been the nicest person.
Right.
And if you go back and you watch every single clip or video or, segment that involves you in it, it's like they portrayed you in this way as someone who was just not a good person. So do you think like that really was just, that whole narrative just was fair or not fair? Or?
The media reporting from this particular news station was not transparent. And it's unfortunate because as journalists, you expect, or as communities, we expect to get the truth and facts. Right. And we're not getting that. What it appears more and more today is that it's about ratings.
Oh,
and,
yes,
to bring people in to watch your station. And they've lost the true focus of, trustworthy news reporting. And so I think that's something that, going forward, the community, legislation, everybody, they need to focus on that more and more. And so, it did play a role in that. But not only that, it also played a role in behind the scenes politics that was happening that was not being reported. Right. And that the community doesn't know about. It was going into a county where it was male-dominated law enforcement as far as supervisory roles. As far at that time when I was in office, also the commissioners was a panel of nothing but men only too at that point. And so to come to the table as elected officials behind the door to discuss, things that, whether it was budgeting issues or changes within the county, to have a woman sit on that table and have an opinion was not very highly liked at all. And it was, this is how we do things here, and this is how we're going to continue. And when you push against that resistance, well, news starts reporting and phone calls are being made, and there's just so much things happening behind closed doors. And during my trial, I was fortunate enough to produce certain evidence and that would back up the truth facts of what we were talking about. Not just, hey, this happened. No, we actually have documentation, recordings, videos, so it backed up a lot of stuff that the community out here did not ever get to see or hear about.
No, we didn't. We didn't, because I think once the news put certain things out there, it was like, okay, she's guilty. Right. And I just felt like that was just how it was across the board. You, throughout it all, you have maintained your innocence. Family, friends, your constituents stick by your side. What do you say to those that were there for you? What do you say to those that, may have been too quick to judge?
With my family and friends, I am so blessed. I mean, I just cannot say thank you enough, even to the constituents that were reaching out to me on a daily basis, whether it was a phone call or actually coming over here and visiting with me. So that was really, really sweet of them. And so I'm just so thankful. But at the same time, going through this journey, I had to decide two things. Either A, it was going to break me, or B, I was going to stand up and walk by faith and not by sight. And so I fell back relying a lot on my faith with my family, praying and, just making it through each day and praying and give me the strength to get up and get out there and, go back into the world, because something like that, I don't think people ever realize the emotional impact it takes on you, as a woman, right? Because I was the leader in that position, but as a mom, and as a wife behind doors, And what the community doesn't get to see is the emotional, fallback of that, whether it was tears being, shedded, or, giving comfort to your kids or your husband, and giving them reassuring, right?
Yeah.
When you know that you're so, I had to be the best example that I possibly could during those moments of time, to show my kids, in those moments where, or, that you just don't think you can do it. I think that I would hope that I could have set that example for my family, and also for other, children, other adults, other females and moms that are in the position I'm in, the young girls growing up, that probably witnessed a lot of this stuff and have questions just like you, like, oh my goodness, what happened? And she was, the first Hispanic female Bexar County constable here. She was supposed to be the role model for us. And now they're just doing all this on TV. So all of that went through my mind and my emotions. And so I really had to just find the strength to get up every day and walk out there. During the first few days of everything being exposed from the beginning, I recall, just going out having lunch with my staff, right, my chain of command, and my husband would join a lot with us when we'd have lunch. And, at first you notice the heads turning and the whispering, and it's obvious, right? Mm-hmm. And it's either I'm going to enjoy my lunch and, get back to work because I have a job to do, and a position I was elected to do, and I have a bunch of people that are depending on me still to follow through with my actions, even though all this side stuff is going on. You know what? I see it, I acknowledge it, but I choose to keep going. It gave me a lot of strength.
Yes.
And my husband also was very encouraging, because of one of the stories, as you well know, broke out too. And it was unfortunate that happened, but it did. We had two male officers that, and it is public record and, official and stuff, that were abusing their time within my office, based on training records and so forth, and where the state, came down from Austin, did an investigation, and actually found that these two officers had falsified records under my command, and they were actually a part of my chain of command, which, was very disappointing to me, because they also are an example underneath me. You're supervisors, you supervise other officers. So if you can do this, what do you expect from the rest of our officers? We have to show them what is right and wrong. And sometimes, in a supervisory role or leadership role, I call it a lonely road.
Oh, yeah.
Because you have to be able to be firm, compassionate, strict, and follow through still. And hopefully, your staff or your officers will understand that we're only trying to do the best possible, job that we can do for our community. And it's not always something that it's an easy road.
I'm sure that all took a personal toll on y'all.
It did. And he, we had our discussions, and, we've been married for, gosh, my oldest son is already 30, so 31 years. At the time, we were 20-something years, about 25 years, I think, at that time, when everything started really exploding. But he knows me, and I know him, and, he's been around me throughout my whole law enforcement career. He'll go in and out of my office when I'm there, or he actually would have lunch with, the chain of command that I speak about at times. And, we all knew each other, and it was like, okay, wow, leading up into the trial, right before a first trial, actually they kept resetting my trial, but the last trial that actually was going to take place in August, I would say probably about maybe 3 weeks prior to that, I had went down to a convention in Dallas, Texas, right? And I went, and we went and enjoyed it. It had to do with a party. And so there's voting and things that are going on for the state conventions. And so we, vote people in, vote people out. And that's what we went in there to do, as well as all the, good information that goes with it. And while I was over there, I was approached when I was just having a conversation like we are by an individual candidate that was running for office. And I'm sure, you guys probably saw one of those stories on TV. She went from a 0 to 100 with her campaign manager. It was just crazy. So I made a police report about this, and threats were made, but not against them. They were actually against some of the people that I was with, as well as myself. And so we made documentation of everything. I come back up here. That was on a Friday. By Monday, we are getting a call saying, hey, you know what? You're probably going to be all over TV and X, Y, and Z happened. I'm like, no, that did not happen. Well, that's what they're reporting. And I'm like, again, you guys, you already know the routine. They're like, yeah, but we just want to let you know. I get a call next day to show up to be in court. The district attorney's office had made the decision to bring me in and put additional bonds on me, to put conditions on me. And they were asking the presiding judge, to do this to me, right? Based on what they assumed or what they were presenting to the judge that I had done in another county. And I was like, oh my gosh. Looking back as a law enforcement officer, when we arrive in the scene, we are going to either dictate if it's an information report or if it's an offense report, right? And if it is an offense report, we have to make sure all elements of the crime fits it. That way we can send it over, investigate, over the DA's office, so forth. I filed an information report. Officers arrived. Nothing took place as far as alleged assaults or anything like that. And that was into that. So the question poses, how does a Bexar County District Attorney have jurisdiction over another, district attorney's office? And better yet, how do you dictate what law enforcement does in another county when they also have their procededures? They're the same procedures, don't get me wrong, except it's a different county. So you can't prosecute somebody, based on an incident in another county when you don't have the facts of that case.
And then want to put more bond restrictions on.
Exactly. And they were high bonds. And so we, it was crazy. So I'm like, well, wait a minute. I can't believe this is happening. And while we're sitting there and, my defense team is, aggressively fighting for, hey, wait a minute, this was just a convention. And the state was presenting that these people were witnesses in my case, and they were not witnesses in my case, and that I had attacked these witnesses. And I was like, that's no. So during that time, the judge agreed not to put the bail bonds on me because she couldn't, because I had always done everything she had asked me to follow or do, since the beginning of everything being started. And then, then what they decided was, the judge decided that at that time that she was going to take my writing votes away. Now, I hadn't even started my trial. I had not been convicted as a felon, but yet you're taking away my constitutional rights to go and vote during the election time of the district attorney.
And this was Judge Mesa.
This was Judge Mesa.
Why?
Right. And so the question is, during that time was election time for the Bexar County District Attorney's Office. And it was obvious that we weren't supporting, that district attorney. And so the restrictions were made. Hey, you no longer can leave Bexar County. If you do, it's only within 30 minutes around Bexar County. You now are going to go drug report, test, alcohol testing. And you now must report to a PSI officer, pretrial service officer, before, the trial begins. And I'm just sitting there thinking, how is it that I'm being criminalized right now? And actually, technically, this is a trial, technically. And I haven't even had due process. And I shouldn't even have due process because I wasn't arrested for a crime. So what crime are we talking about that you're putting all these conditions on me?
I mean, I can't. I begged the DA's office to put conditions on certain people, and I can't get them to put any conditions on these
exactly.
bonds.
So it becomes personal, and my team aggressively fought for it. It was put down on paperwork, titled underneath my current case. So I got conditions, and it was titled under my current case, and I was like, this has nothing to do with this case, and it never happened. There is nothing. You just violated all my due process, all my constitutional rights. So yes, and it was filed with paperwork, and it's just crazy. And so we went through that. So these are things my boys and my kids were seeing and witnessing and experiencing leading up to the trial in 3 weeks. So now I, will have to go report literally. So when trial actually began, what we saw was just, just amazing. And amazing is a good word that I'm using. And what we experienced going in there, because we had support, family, and friends that were attending this trial, is that we came across several investigators from the district attorney's office as they're sitting in the courtroom and going in and out. And then we witnessed the DA's office bringing tons of boxes and putting them behind them. And we're like, what is all that? Like, that has nothing to do with me. But okay, so they staged everything up. But in between this, the investigators were taunting my family. They were picking cell phones up and recording my kids in the gallery in the back. As they would pass my kids up, they would bump them and push them out the way. And, all this is transpiring. And who do you tell? Because the DA is not going to do anything. The Bexar County Sheriff was my opponent, which we'll go back to that of how I winded up in this position. And he's in charge of the courtroom. And so who do you report to? And, the best advice that I sat down and me and my family had a good discussion of, how do we go in that courtroom and interact as best as we possibly can without putting any of my family in danger or in a position that they needed not to be in, right? And so we went through that. And so all my sons would ignore it, just go sit down. And this went on for several days. Even in the hallway, making remarks or just gestures by some of the deputies that were working there or the investigators. But never have I seen before that day where Bexar County District Attorney investigators go and sit in a trial, or they hang around to provide security. Because a job of the security of the Bexar County courts is the sheriff's office. He supplies the deputies to go in these courtrooms and bailiffs and things like that. So why did we have the district attorney's office in there? It posed several questions. And so, going up into now, going through the trial, finishing it up, now returning back for punishment phase and things like that, where now the judge is actually going to read, the actual punishment I'm fixing to receive. And, everybody always says, was it a shock with the jury when it came back with the verdict? It wasn't to me. My legal team, gosh, they did the best job that they possibly could. And, it was emotional for both sides, right? Myself and some of my team members. But we were getting letters mentioning the jury here in this office. So I knew that jury was not going to vote in my favor. It wasn't going to happen. Although my team had, hey, we did a good job. And it's true, we kicked their ass every day in trial. We really did. They did, and we worked together as a team. But I knew. I came back and we sat in this office for about 4 hours. And, of course, my family they're hopeful. And I can't take that away from them. But I know what's going to happen. I've been in that politic world. I've been working with these men for several years and months. And, I knew. And so we walked in and sure enough, we got the verdict back. And I think that, my kids reacted as any little boy would act with his mom. This is mom. And they saw everything, the back end, the back door of everything that the community wasn't seeing. And so, it was fortunate. And, I remember looking back and even just watching the video and being there was like so surreal because I'm there and I feel like I'm seeing everything. And today I see like if it's slow motion to me. Even till today, I remember hearing and turning around and just seeing, and I'm like, and I didn't shed a tear. I didn't have any, I wasn't scared. From the beginning, I've never been scared because I knew the truth. I knew it was going to come out eventually and things like that. But at that moment in time, I wasn't a police officer. Now I'm a mom. And so I'm looking and oh man, I beat up myself a lot because I'm like, I let myself get a little emotional. And I remember just kind of getting my sunglasses and putting them on because I just never show that side of myself out to the community or really anybody outside of my home. And I didn't want those tears to come because I could feel the emotions coming in. And I remembered everybody just being rushed out, right? And I'm thinking, as a mom, oh my God, what's going to happen to my boys? But as a police officer, I'm thinking, I know what's going to happen to them outside that door, So I have the mom emotions and the law enforcement, and it's like a little battle inside me, and it's like, oh my God, and it's just going through me within seconds. It's crazy, It's crazy what power does to some individuals. So where's the justification in law with that? And that was my fight too when I was in that leadership role as a constable, was like, wait a minute, we need to take a step back. We're here to serve and to protect. Those are our main goals as a constable's office here. And we are definitely going to go out and serve our community. And we're definitely going to go out there and protect our community. But also during that time, I experienced another law enforcement office wanting to run my law enforcement office. And so stories would break that I wasn't providing security, at the constable's office for the JP and myself. And, the back end story of that was, the facts of that story was that what they weren't, providing on TV was that I actually was going back and forth with the Bexar County commissioners, getting more law enforcement for the constables, because at that time it was about 500,000 individuals that resided within Precinct 2. And then we also had to provide civil process, right? So it's mainly residential in Precinct 2 at the time. And so we had, processing coming in every day, and we didn't have the manpower to get out there and push the paperwork. It was impossible. Although, there was days that we would go in and put some overtime to try to maintain as much as we could. But, you can only do so much because, my officers also have a family and home, and they need rest, and I do too. And so
crime doesn't stop. It just
keeps going. So, so those are things. And so then when I would ask for more law enforcement, at one time they came back and said, look, Constable, the justice of the peace, he wants to go ahead and get a security guard and put in the front door. And I'm like, well, that's my job. And I provide security for the peace. I mean, the judge, we, as officers will have to protect him because his duty is on the bench. And when he comes off, he needs to be escorted, or we need, maintain control in the courtroom. Those are things that we do. I said, so how is he going to be in charge of security? That I can't wrap my mind around that, but okay. I said, well, I mean, what's going to happen? And so we went back and forth about getting more law enforcement. At the end of the day, they had funded him because they were making phone calls behind the doors with, commissioners and that justice of the peace about getting funding to pay for law enforcement. So eventually they winded up hiring a security company, and they brought in a security guard eventually. But it was crazy because they were like, okay, Constable, you're not in charge. This justice of the peace is in charge. He's going to maintain security of the lobby and everything. And, sorry, it's not going to be your thing. And I was like, okay, let me make this clear. And I have recorded conversations, going back and forth with the county on this about, how I was adamant to protect the community and protect members that are coming in conducting business there, because they need to be protected.
Right.
It's still a courtroom, although it's a smaller portion of it, but it's still a courtroom and things happen. And so it was very important that, we do that. And so no, they proceeded forward, gave the money over to the general fund into the justice of the peace. and funded him a security guard and asked me to clear out. So I was like, okay. So I remember having conversations about it. Is he prepared? Does he know what kind of equipment he needs and things like this? Because all the equipment that's out there was funded by the constable's office. So if you want us to clear out, we'll clear out.
Yeah.
We're going to clear out. Yeah, we'll clear out. But, is he prepared? Is he ready for that? So constable, it's no longer your job. So I was like, okay. All right. And I mean, it bothered me like crazy, but I had no choice because the commissioners are funding money. Men are calling men for friendships behind the doors, and all this stuff is going on. And they're disregarding my duties as the constable, not even as a woman, but as the constable. Put the male and female card aside. I was elected official just like the rest of them. And so where was the respect of allowing me to run the office the way it needed to be run? And so we experienced where, they came in, the sheriff's office, and, I got a call and they're like, hey, constable, you need to get back to the office. We got a bunch of sheriff deputies showing up. And I'm like, what? And they're like, yeah, they came and informed us that, you're not doing your job around here. And he goes, and I tried to reassure them, but they're not listening. So he goes, and there's some chiefs showing up too. I'm like, oh my goodness. And I remember going back into the office. I think my face just said it all, because I remember walking out into the lobby and there was a security guard that we had watched hours before just let people walk in because he didn't have any equipment to operate with, wasn't taking directions from no one because Justice of the Peace was on the bench. And so I remember going out to the lobby and seeing, some officers standing there and the security guard and one of the chiefs from the sheriff's office. And like I said, I think my face said it all because I remember security guard just grabbing his jacket, nonchalant, and says, see ya. And he walks right out the door.
Of course he does.
I just don't ever see him ever again.
Yeah.
So from that day, I've never seen him again. The sheriff deputies are looking at me and they just started just kind of getting back from the little check-in area where the booth's at. They just kind of just start going back. And I remember the chief turned around looking at me. And of course, a few of my members of the staff, the chain commander, with me. And so, I'm like, hey, I began questioning what's going on here. And so they began to inform me that they were told that I wasn't doing my job and I refused to provide security. And so there was a call by the Justice of the Peace to the commissioner at that time from Precinct 2, and of course the sheriff, and they all agreed that they needed to go in there and do the security since I didn't know how to do my job. It was crazy. And then at that time, I remember the Justice of the Peace, I guess, must have finished whatever he was doing in his courtroom, because I remember giggling and laughing behind me. And I was like, I cannot believe that is the judge, right? I could not believe it. And I remember turning back and he's giggling and laughing like it's a game. And he's trying to direct me that, go on, you don't have any authority here. We're taking charge kind of deal. And I was like, oh my goodness. Okay, well, I'm still a police officer. So I remember turning back around and I'm like, sir, I said, I'm going to have to ask you to step away. I said, by that time, I was grabbing my handcuffs. I said, or I'm going to have to place you, under arrest or detain you because you're now interfering with law enforcement duties at this point. You are no longer on the bench. Your authorities are inside that courtroom with your robe on. I said, out here, it's not your authority at this point in time. And I remember him looking at, at the deputies, and he still has a grinning look on his face. And all the deputies are just looking at me, and he turns around and tells them, y'all need to start recording all this. Record what she's doing. I knew that he was one of the guys reporting me to the TV, and I'm like, and I looked at the deputies, and they just looked at me, and I don't know why, but those two deputies that day decided, no, we're not going to record her. You have a camera right there, which that's another story. You have a camera right there. It could just record everything that's happening right here. We're not going to record. And he's like, you're not? And so I took a step towards him with my handcuffs because he was refusing to leave. At that point, I think he snapped and he was like, oh crap, she really is going to arrest me. And he just turned around and he just jotted out of there back to his courtroom, shut the courtroom doors, and that was it. I didn't see him after that. But yeah, and so I told the sheriff department and the chief, I'm like, I'm going to go ahead and relieve you from your duties here because you do not have the authority to make those decisions. I am the Bexar County Constable here, Precinct 2, and yes, you are going to respect my authority. I said, so you need to clear out. And I directed my chain of command to go ahead and take possession of the front door and begin manning that door. From that point on, we are now going to man it. And the deputies were like, well, where do we go? Because, the sheriff wants us here. And these guys were, you're a Bexar County Sheriff deputy. Go back to your job of what you're supposed to be doing, what the taxpayers paying you to do is what you need to go and do.
Go on the
not
streets,
sit here and play
somebody.
games.
Yeah.
And so they're like, no, if we go back, we're going to get in trouble. And I'm like, oh my goodness. So they wind up in my conference room. The chief decided to leave, right? And so, I said, well, I asked my secretary, get a hold of the sheriff. I want to talk with him. So, the secretary's like, look, they're telling me he's not in the office. I'm like, he is in the office. I know he's in the office. I know this guy, right? And so I walk in my conference room and one of the deputies is giggling and laughing on the phone. I'm like, hey, who are you on the phone with? He goes, oh, it's the sheriff. I'm like, oh, thank you. And so I get this phone, right? He hangs up. I said, thank you. And the deputies are just like, oh my gosh, So then I go back and I'm like, look, put him on the phone. So finally, a chief deputy calls, who happens now to be a chief over at the constable's office. And he says, hey, Constable Vela, I'm reaching out to you. I got a message here to give you a call. I'm like, you didn't get a message to call me. I said, the message was for the sheriff. I said, but I know he's sitting next to you because I know you guys. I said, so if you have me on speaker, great. I said, because what I'm going to do is get in my patrol unit and I'm going to drive over there and I'm going to sit in front of his door till he comes out and talks to me because this is unacceptable. What is happening here and the treatment I'm getting. It's just not right. And I know you guys are going to let out a story. I already know it. So make a choice. Thank you. And I hung up. Probably within 2 minutes, he calls the sheriff. And so we had a conversation about what was happening and, about what was transpiring and the deputies that were in my conference room and how, they're scared to leave because they're scared to get in trouble and things like that. So conversations going on and, he finds it amusing. He thinks it's funny. And I'm like, all you had to do was call me from one elected official to another. Hey, Constable, what's going on? And I would have told you, I said, and we could have worked together as elected officials. I said, but no, y'all decided to play the friendship game, the mail game back behind the scenes, making calls and stuff. And then y'all do this to me. And, I think one point or another, I'm circumventing around what he said, but pretty much what he says was like, hey, if, they call me, my friends, I'll do whatever they need me to do, kind of deal. And
he has a track record of doing that.
Yes. And so I was like, okay, I'll tell you what. You want to run the constable's office? I'll tell you what, maybe I need to run for the Bexar County Sheriff and show you what a real sheriff can do. I said, because you don't know what the hell you're doing over at your office, but yet you want to run mine. And so the conversation led into kind of that. And then I ended it. But not only did I make a phone call to, the sheriff, but I had a phone call to the commissioner at that time of Precinct 2, who is no longer alive. And it was a heated conversation because he pretty much said, look, if you don't do what I want you to do, I'm in control of the budget, not you. And it was like, you want to play hardball, I think was his words. And I'm like, balls, I'm not playing any ball with anybody. I'm just doing my job. And all I want is the respect for you guys to allow me to do the job that the constituents elected me to do. That's all I want. I'm not asking for favors. I don't want favors. I'm not into that. All I want is to just do it by the book. That's all I'm asking for. That's it. And, we had civil process that needed to be mailed out or delivered, need postage stamps and things like that. They had turned off the funding and the money to the postal machine that we were using. So that was a way of controlling me. So now we had envelopes of civil process that needed to be mailed out to give notice to individuals in the community. How do we get that out there when they turned off the funding to the machine that we use to put postage on this stuff? So I actually began using my personal money. So so what I did is, you know what? Here's some money. Go get the stamps, put them on there, and get them out, because we're going to have a story saying that constable is failing her duties. They're not getting, the workout and all this stuff. So I can just imagine the story.
Right.
And so we began doing that. And then at one point we had a debit card issued from the county too. So we used that in order to go buy stamps, because they were playing with all my funding. They were not paying my bills. Bill collectors that don't call the elected officials that deal with the budget company, right? That they go in back and forth with the bills or whatnot. Right. We're calling my office. They're like, "Can we speak to the constable?" So the calls were coming through, and I'm like, "Hi, how can I help you?" And they're like, "Hey, well, your bill is overdue, and it's like $300 some, and we mailed you the mail." And I'm like, "What?" And so I would ask my clerk, "Bring me the paperwork." And sure enough, we had bills that weren't being paid, right? And we have a process set up with the county where when bills are due, we have a computer system set up, and it shows, the budget for this and the budget for that. And we'll put it through paperwork, and I'll sign off, and it goes over to the county budgeting. They're the ones that issue out everything and pay. And this is all done by my clerk. I just sign off that she did the job and that it's processing through. But we don't sign checks, and we don't have control of money to pay bills. And so that was happening. And then I get a call from one of the supervisors from the budget department, and he's like, "Hey, constable," he goes, "I'm going to be referring you over to the credit companies." And I said, "Credit companies? What are you talking about?" And he's like, "Yeah, because you're just buying stuff that you shouldn't be buying, and so we're not going to pay it. So we're going to go ahead and let these credit companies know so they can put it on your credit, and you deal with it." I was like, "Wait a minute, is this for every constable and every law enforcement, even the sheriff, that's going through this, or is it just me?" And he's like, "I'm not going to discuss that with you." I'm like, "No problem." So I began doing open records requests for budgeting and things like that, especially at the sheriff's office. They were hiding his records. They would not make them available. It was, and so I experienced the justice of the peace trying to control the office, who shared the same building with me, the same lobby, giggling and laughing at me. And if you look during the trial, at one time, he takes the stand and he's making me out to be this bad person. And he talks about, I went in her office and, I had my law book, but she said she knew the law because, the lawyer stuff or something he says about being a lawyer, going to school for law. It is true. I did sign for pre-law in college. That's true. And I did go become a paralegal. That is true. I never said I was an attorney. What he doesn't share with the people is that he was going through that time with the sheriff and the commissioners and telling me how to do my job, that he decided to come in again with the law book and sit down in front of me and tell me site by site, this is the law. And my response to him was, I got his book very nicely and I shut it really nice. And I just kind of laid it to the side. And I said, if I take any direction as far as the law or advice, I have to seek that from the Bexar County District Attorney's office, just like you do. Even though you're an attorney and I get it, and you know the laws, I get that. But you also are the elected official, and you have to take direction from the district attorney's office, because we're in these roles. So if we have an issue, we go through that process, right? I said, so no, I do not take any direction from you, and you can take your law book and you can X out of my office. Thank you. And I did. And that was it. And I was stern. I mean, I'm not going to say that I was, the very sweetest person. I was being stern because of that's the only way that they would understand. Because if I sat back and just like, okay, he would really run over me. And I could not allow that. When I left the office and that day came, shortly after, right, the sheriff and the incident with not providing security and things like that, I decided, okay, this is getting too much. I really need to be careful. then I start getting notice that, that the Rangers are kind of hanging around, and I'm like, well, good, because I've been going to his office trying to get a hold of that Texas Ranger because I have cases I need him to review. And so we literally were driving to his office, and he was always avoiding me or my chain of command. He was never in the office, or just call him or whatever it was. Yeah, Mr. Freeman. Never make himself available to us. And because I wanted a second pair of eyes as far as investigations, give it a second look, and then we put it through the DA's office. Do I have to do that? No. Right. So it just wouldn't fall back on the constable's office. I want you to see what we're seeing. So, the park incident. I was contacted by the county, and there's records of this. If we could provide security for Easter, right? Which we had done the year before. And I said, yeah, sure. But you know what? The officers, that's our side job money. It's more money, on a holiday. Y'all know that, and so we went back and forth. Well, not me, but me, my clerk. And, of course, she'd run things through me. And so they were told, the fees and things like that. And they're like, no, we're only going to pay this amount. Well, this is what the officers get paid because they're leaving their kids. It's Easter, come on, and their wife, and
it's busy at the park during Easter.
It's extremely busy and packed. And so, so this is going back and forth. So eventually, they said, okay, well, we need 4 officers. I said, okay, well, and that park is assigned to my area. And my thing was like, when I first took office, I was like, we don't have the manpower to maintain that park because I need them out in the street. And then you're asking me to have these guys work on the weekend, over there. And technically the constable's office doesn't work on the weekend. And, and so what do we do? Right. But dealing with the elected official that was in charge was like, it's your job, get it done kind of deal. And, I don't want to hear it no more, kind of the attitude. Yeah. I don't want to hear the opinions. I don't want to hear the ideas, get it done. So I was like, okay, fine. You know what? I'll do the best I can. So we had 4 officers, and one of them was me for the park for that Easter because I didn't have the manpower. And my officers, they put in like forms to do part-time jobs, and if they get accepted, we approve it, and they're already signed off. And, I'm not going to pull them from a job that they already made a commitment to outside the office, right? So so I had to be one of the officers. So I was like, okay, well, and I had made plans. I wasn't going to work on Easter. And I said, well, I'm going to balance this. So I ended up going to that park the Saturday before that Easter because we were shorthanded. So I go over there and I'm working, security. And I'm just sitting in my car, watching everything because everything's quiet. Kids are playing. And when one of the maintenance guy comes over, and he's like, hey, hi, Constable, what are you doing? And he's just chatting a little bit. And looking back, and I thought, man, I should have known better, but I was just being friendly, And he's like, he goes, what are you going to do tomorrow? I'm like, well, I said, I'm probably going to I have to work here because I don't have the manpower. So I had planned to, spend Easter with the kids, but, I get off early. So I guess I could save the day and we'll just celebrate at the end of the day. And he goes, well, that pavilion over there, they canceled it. I was like, really? I said, nobody in the office didn't tell me anything about that because I have a clerk that's in charge. And she updates me. And it's Saturday and she's off already. And I'm like, So he goes, just call the foreman. He'll tell you. I'm like, oh, okay, well, yeah, I'll find out, whatever, I said, I might consider it, right? I'm debating it. So eventually I do have a talk with one of the guys that takes the stand, Henry, the park supervisor. And, he tells me, yeah, Constable, they canceled. You want to rent it? And I'm like, you know what? I think it would be a good idea. I said, because I'll work part of the day. My family and them can set up, do their thing, and then I'll just go to the restroom, change, secure my stuff, and I'm here ready. I said, put regular clothes, finish off the day, and we can go home. Best of 2 worlds. Right. Why not? Let's make this happen. So he told me the fees and everything. And so then I got the money orders, everything. I showed up to work the next morning at 7:00 at the park. We had 2 deputies, me and the chief, and then 2 more would come, a little later. And so we're working the first part of the day, and we were working everything we're supposed to be doing. And then I think eventually, I get waved down. a park goer, I guess, that had rented the pavilion was there to claim his area. And so that's kind of how everything began. And then the park manager is like, I'm so sorry, I made the mistake. And I'm just like, not a big deal.
Right.
What's up somewhere else?
Right.
I just need my money back, but
right.
What's up? So before I know it, the constituent is drinking. The chief has already informed him of the park rules. And things are just falling everywhere. And it's like, oh my God. And they're demanding to talk to constable. Out of everybody, why did I get paid? I just, and looking back, I'm like,
Yeah.
But, and I remember talking with the man and trying to calm him down and, telling the park rules, asking for the paperwork, right, that he should have, which he didn't have, which clearly showed all the park rules and how you're supposed to call constables.
Right.
And I wasn't informed that there was a cancellation, that he even rented that, and so, so we went kind of through all that. And then, of course, came the time that we have to tell him the fee because now you're drinking. Or I can give you the option where you just go and step anywhere else and you can drink. It's not a big deal, and it actually kind of would help us because we don't have to get security out here, right? But no, he insisted he wanted to be there. And so it was like, okay, well, what do we do? So I said to him, go ahead and set up, do whatever you want to, do as far as getting everything going. I'm just going to ask you not to drink. What we can do is we can check out from our other position that we're doing, and then we'll come and provide security for you. So I just, I'll give up my Easter and just finish off the day. It's not a big deal. So, so he was like, okay, that's fine. So, before he knew it, it just, everybody was calm though. He was okay with it. He had gotten the money and he had paid my chief. I never even collected any money. Right. And so my chief and him, they make the exchange with the pay of the hours that we were supposed to be working for him. And the day went on, and the time frame that he initially told my chief that he would clear out for security had came and gone. And so my chief was like, what do you want me to do? I'm like, you know what? Just keep watching them. We'll just keep, that's it. I don't know if he's going to pay us or not, but we're going to have to still provide security. We have to. He's drinking. We have to follow through with that. And so they must have left a little bit around like 8:30 or something. I feel like it's in my skin. 8:30 or something. And so we jotted out literally right after them. Like they pulled out and we pulled out in our cars. And I had to take the patrol units that day because the sheriff deputies were, the sheriff was refusing to send over a patrol unit. If an incident happened, we need to make an arrest for a transport.
Right.
He wouldn't transport for us. And I'm like, but what are we going to do? If something breaks out, I have no way of we can't put them in our personal cars. Right. So I had to make the decision that day to take 2 patrol units because if something was to happen, we need a transport. And so, these people left. We went right behind them. Everybody left, and so the guys locked up, the maintenance, and everybody left. The next day, I remember going to the district attorney's office to go check on some cases. And this was like within hours after the park. And I remember one of the chiefs there, who's now an actual presiding judge, tells me at one point or another, Constable, I'm going to have to criminally depose you. And I'm like, excuse me? Like, let me stop everything right. Because I'm kind of listening because my chain of command, everybody's talking about business. I'm just waiting for it to finish up. And she says that to me. And I'm thinking, wait a minute. What'd you tell me? And she's like, well, I may have to criminally depose you. I'm like, well, let me stop you right there. And now everybody's looking on the table like, wait a minute. Now everything has just shifted, right? And everybody has a puzzled look like, what are we talking about here? None of us, we were totally like caught off guard with that. And so she insisted about doing this. I'm like, I'm going to stop you there because if you're trying to tell me something, then you need to tell me because I have a right to counsel. And if we're going down that direction, then we're going to go ahead and end this conversation, this meeting, and we're going to exit out already. I said, because I'm not going to stay here talking to you. I said, because the only thing I know is those 2 lawsuits I have with those deputies that y'all are going through and stuff. And so, again, we were there because of cases. And So we pretty much exited out of there. We left, right? This is hours after, right? After Easter. And then, of course, eventually I go before the commissioners, and then boom. Now, I've shortly after that, I make an announcement, and then the sheriff already knows I'm running for that. But that Monday, after leaving the district attorney's office, I get a call from some friends. They're like, "Hey, you're going to be all over TV. We're hearing stuff." And I'm like, "What? It's okay. I'm used to it. I'll pull out the popcorn again." I said, "What do you want me to do?" I'm like, "I can't stop it. So it's going to happen. It's going to happen." And sure enough, Constable squeezed money out of park goer and, all this stuff. Yeah. And it was just like, what? And then I had a news reporter make contact and come in the office and take a report about that. He was one of them that totally went and published something in a newspaper, totally opposite. And of course, he was friends with the commissioners. And I was just like, oh my God. And then there's reporting that the sheriff deputies were in the park, or trying to get in the park, and I wouldn't let them in. And I'm like, wait a minute. And I remember there at the park that day where one of my deputies that was working came and tells me, "Hey, Constable, the ladies that are in this party." And I'm like, "Yeah," because I didn't really know what was going on with the party. Mm-hmm. "Well, we got waved down. They're saying that they're going to call the sheriff on you because they're not happy with the security or something." Because I don't know what's going on. I was like, "Don't worry about it. We got it under control. We already took care of it, me and the chief." I said, "I'll let the chief of justice, take care of it." And he was like, "Okay, no problem. I just want to let you know." So now I know in the back of my mind, there's a connection with the sheriff right there. But I blew it off because people call the sheriff, that are friends all the time. Mm-hmm. And if I'm at a party, they'll call him and tell me, "Hey, she's over here right now." So, not at a party, but like at a convention party or like a, Democrat party. And so she's over here, she's doing this. Well, the crazy thing is that that Monday night and by Tuesday, I'm all over the paper. Sheriff deputies weren't allowed in. So I went back to my office and I brought in a chain of command, my lieutenant. And I said, "This is what I want you to do." I said, "Everything I ever showed you how to do an investigation." He's like, "Yeah." I said, "I want you to go out there and investigate that part." He goes, "But you were there." I'm like, "I know." I said, "I want you to investigate it." Mm-hmm. I said, "Then I want you to come back and tell me what you found." I said, "That's all I'm asking you to do." He goes, "Everything?" I said, "Everything. From whoever was there to when we left, what happened, everything and anything you possibly find. I want you to put the sheriff's cars right next to my patrol units inside that park." Because they're saying that, they were there and that I wasn't letting them in. I said, "So if they were there and there's reports that the police were there from the sheriff's office, there must be police reports, right? Mm-hmm. I want everything. So you put them in that park with me." I said, "But I'm going to tell you right now, they were never there." He's like, "Okay." So he exits out, does his full investigation. He comes back, he goes, "Constable, you're right." I was like, "Well, what did you find?" And he begins to share with me, right, everything, which we put the video out there. I don't know if you saw that one. We were standing in front of the courthouse and the lieutenant's giving an update of what he had found that day at the park. And then the chief, of course, explains another incident with the arrest of an officer there. And so, but he goes into detail about what was found, because I thought it was important that we went there that day, for him to share his findings, right? Because it wasn't my investigation, it was his. And to let the community know exactly what had happened. Because I know that was what happened that day was going to be a different story portrayed out in the community.
Right. Yeah. Oh, yeah. And it was.
And it was not going to be what happened.
Yeah.
So he stood in front of the steps and he explained the whole investigation and from A to Z, and this is what we found. This is what happened. What occurred really was that when you go back and watch the video, is what he found was that the deputies were way over here off of 604, right? They were never near the park. Mm-hmm. And he said there had to have been a personal call that went through, from somebody. And he believes it's a sheriff, but, there's a personal call that went through. And they began running me, not as a constable, just as a regular person through the system. And eventually they drive over to the general area where the park was at. And I don't know if you've ever been to Rodriguez Park, but when you go in, there's like a little bridge over water, and you travel a little bit, and then there's the park gate to actually get in there. And so the officers came, and then she drove around a bit, hesitated, went into the bridge, made a flip around, went out, and took off, right? That's what the record showed. These are official records that showed this, that tracked their location, longitude, latitude, everything, and they left. But the reporting that was out there was that, you know, she didn't let him in. She shook everybody up.
Right.
So this investigation was done. So, you know, what my question is that, you know, when the ranger stepped in, why didn't you complete a full investigation? Why didn't you go and take the initial steps to do what your job entails you to do, to really get in there and look at if you really want the truth?
Right.
You go in there, back into our systems, you look at longitude, latitude, where these officers travel, everything that we're trained to do when it comes to investigations. And he would have found the exact same thing. But he didn't. He chose to roll with the story and then do the execution on the search warrant to look for records that they claimed that I hid, which were records that were proven during trial. Right. That was on top of my clerk's desk in her possession, control, custody, care. I mean, she completely controlled those records. Yeah, so I get a call like at 6 a.m, and it's one of my deputies, regular deputies, right? And it's, you know, an unusual call because you can hear his emotions. You can hear the fear in his voice and the uncertainty, right? Yeah. And it's all those emotions, and he's just mumbling, and I'm like, oh, slow down. I'm like, he goes, I'm being surrounded. And my initial thought is like, you know, I'm like jumping up from bed because he's yelling, I'm being surrounded. And I'm like, what is going on with my deputy? Is he in danger?
Right.
You know, is he calling for my help? Do I need to get to him? I mean, I'm in bed, but I'll put my boots on and go. And so he finally catches his breath, and he starts slowing down, you know, and he goes, Constable, he goes, you need to get to the office right now. I'm like, okay, you know, and by then I'm already getting dressed because of the fear in his voice.
Right.
And so, that's, you know, I'm on the phone hanging in, trying to get dressed. And he's like, he goes, the Texas Rangers and DPS are all around the office. I'm like, what? He's like, yeah, they're everywhere. He goes, and they won't let us leave. He goes, they're surrounding us. And I'm like, they won't let you leave. And I'm like, okay. I said, you know, I told this deputy, I'm like, you know what? Calm down. Just breathe. I will be there shortly, and I will take care of everything. Okay, just calm down. I said, go somewhere safe and just breathe for a bit. And he's like, well, I can't leave. I'm like, okay, well, find a comfortable, you know, just calm down, you know, because I'm just trying to get him to bring those emotions back down because he's really hyped up. And this was a person that was very just calm and mellow officer. I had never experienced that. You know, I had experienced that with this officer in an incident on the street, but not as far as calling me and just
the urgency.
Right. So I get over there. Well, I actually, you know, we made some phone calls. I began getting phone calls too from my chain of command and so forth. So at one point or another, I remember my chief saying, "Hey, I'm gonna pick you up, right? I'm gonna pick you up, and we're gonna go to the office." And I'm like, "Okay, well, I'm just gonna be in my patrol car here. Just pick me up, and we'll go." He said, "Yeah, I'll drive you, so be ready." So I'm like, "Okay." So yeah, he showed up pretty quick, and I remember jumping in the patrol car, and we're heading over there, and we're just, you know, and I never carry a purse. I don't know. It was just me hyped up, and I just grabbed my purse because I don't carry a purse. It's really just for show because my husband buys me purses. I'm like, stop buying them because I don't use them. So I grabbed it, and I guess, you know, in the process, I must have just thrown my cell phone in my bag. I don't know what I was thinking. And I get in the car and I leave. And I remember pulling up, you know, to the precinct, and we were coming around to the side, through the back door where we initially come to the back parking area. We have a big cage area, right? And, you know, just seeing all the FBI agents, you know, with FBI in the back, and, the Texas Rangers and their dressed white shirts and blue jeans and cowboy hats and boots, and and then I saw the DPS deputies, blocking off the entrance into the cage, and what was considered an exit outside the cage of the parking area where all the officers were inside. Large sum of officers were inside that cage, and they were in there, right? They couldn't exit in or out. You can't do that. You can't restrain somebody unlawfully if they haven't committed a crime. And so they weren't allowed to go in and out. And I'm looking at this, and my chief was looking at this, and we're just like, we just can't. It's like being in the movie, like, who's the person they're looking for, because, it's like all this because I pushed back. That's what's going through my mind. And I'm like, I'm not that powerful of a person. I'm not, I'm just a mom, police officer. Yes, I made it to elected position, but I didn't allow it to get to me. I didn't allow it to dictate who I was or forget where I came from, and that's something that I held on to throughout the whole ordeal. And and so it was crazy. And then before we know it, we're getting hit with the ranger who testified, the search warrant and stuff, and then trying to question us at the same time. And I'm like, we need to read this warrant first. You're asking me questions, and we don't even know what's going on. I mean, I kind of knew in the back of my mind, but this was to the extreme, and I thought, wow, because the officers that you saw on the trial were the same officers that were there that day with me, they worked with me, under me. They were hired, a lot of them underneath me, as a new staff trying to clean up precinct 2. It was a show. I mean, there was crime scene tape all over the place. When you would go into the lobby, my doors were crime scene. What are people going to think? I mean, you're scaring the community.
That was, I think, part of it. It was
exactly.
Let's get this. Everyone's scared.
And of course, you saw the big old trucks that they brought in. I'm like, what are you going to fit in there? Because we don't really have anything. I was like,
they were saying that she did. The whole thing was $300.
Yes,
for 2 officers.
Right. Yeah, and I was just like, oh my goodness. So I remember, going in and telling the DPS, because Freeman's trying to follow me around a little bit. And I'm like, hold on, I'll talk to you in a minute. I got to take care of my officers, because even though you're here, I still have a job to do, So I remember, going towards the DPS officers, and they're rolling their window down. And I'm like, good, guys, I hope you can respect the fact that I'm the constable still. I said, and that you move your patrol cars. As well as I know, that you do not have any authority to be blocking these officers inside this cage. Do you know what it looks like? I said, so I need you to move your patrol cars right now. So I had to go to both ends. And you know what? They agreed. Those guys in those 2 patrol cars never gave me, and there was 2 in each one, never gave me a hard time. They were like, okay, constable. So they reversed their cars, and then we were able to get into the gate, right? And, have a conversation with my deputies. And I had to make a decision. Do I, let them stay there and watch everything, or do I let them go home? And what do we do? Because we have no access to the office. We can't do our work. It's impossible. So I said, you know what? I said, guys, y'all go ahead and go home. The chain of command, we're going to stay here and we'll finish off this. You can't work, there's no reason for you to stand here and, have the embarrassment. The chain of command will call you this evening. Your supervisors will let you know what we're going to do tomorrow. But as of today, I'm relieving you from your duty, and go home and just take a breather. And I got nothing
plastered all over the news.
Yeah. I just opened my door, months before, to the state to come in. I gave them full access to my office because I wanted to investigate 2 of the deputies. And I literally had 2 investigators that worked for me. And I was like, hey, whatever their deputies, whatever they need, whatever access they want, no question, open it up and let them see whatever they want. They want access to my office, let them go in there. I have nothing to hide here. I want the truth once they're done with their investigation. That's all I want. If they want to investigate you guys too, then you sit down in the conference room and have that talk with them too. But we are going to give them full access of the office. So Texas Rangers. What were you doing when law enforcement were literally already all over my office before that. So it was a show. It was a show to portray me that I was this horrible person, a constable that was not the right choice for that position, was failing her constituents. Really basically I was a monster is what they were portraying me to be. And, and there's no other better word to put it.
No, there from the outside looking in, there really isn't a better word to put that. And that's just how it was portrayed.
Yeah, it was horrible.
So with that, and then, this past year with the 8th Court of Appeals overturning everything, citing literally the evidence was insufficient to support your conviction. What did you think when you heard that?
We were celebrating my mother-in-law's birthday, and we were around our dinner table and we're chatting, and I let my mind start thinking, and I'll start beating myself up a little bit, like, man, can't this already be over? I mean, why are we still going through this? And so those emotions, I'm human, they still go through me. I just want the people to know the truth, and it bothers me that the community doesn't know what happened, right? He's like, hang in there, it's going to be okay. And so, go ahead. Gotta take a moment.
No, it's okay.
Yeah. So, so we're sitting around the dinner table, and he's like, he's hanging there. He's like,
we had prepared so much for it. We went and hired the best attorney.
Right. So we hung in there. He's like, hang in there. He goes, you're a strong woman. He goes, I just don't know how you do it. He goes, anybody else? He goes, they probably wouldn't be here. He goes, honestly, and I got that from a lot of people.
Yeah.
He goes, so just hang in there. And I'm like, I am. And so he gives me that pep talk that I need. And I'm like, okay, so we're eating dinner. We're having a good time. And I have to learn to, like the Bible says, be still. Yeah, we get the call. Well, I don't get the call. I get a text, right? And I see my text go off. And so I see it, and I'm like, I wonder what the attorney's going to tell me. Because I know it's an attorney. I can see it. And I'm like, okay, let me pop myself up and, get into that mindset to take whatever he's fixing to tell me, right? And so I get it. And then I see something that says you win or you won. And I'm like, I can't. So let me go get my glasses. So I'm like, let me get my glasses. So then I'm reading it, and I see the message. And I'm like, oh, my God. No, wait, And so, I rush out the door because everybody's talking. It's loud, and my grandkids are running around, and my daughter, and they're yelling and playing. And so I run out the front door, and I guess my husband saw me because I just jotted out. And I called the attorneys, and we started having a conversation. I said, hey, I just got your text. He's like, yeah, congratulations. And I'm like, and the emotions just, started coming. And I was like trying to hold back because my legal team, who also, one of the hood was also the district attorney, elected official. So I'm like, I don't like to show my emotions, And so it was kind of like, you know what? Emotions are emotions. So they came. And so, there were happy tears. My husband's there, and he got emotional too. And my team is just like, congratulations. And, we're just talking about the whole appeal thing and stuff. And by this time I'm kind of wandering into my room. I'm just like walking everywhere with the phone, I guess. And I never realized my son's recording me. And I'm like talking to one of my good friends. I'm like, hey, I call her afterwards. I'm like, I got good news. Let me share it with you, kind of deal. And she's yelling over the phone too. And so it was emotional, for all of us, for her and me and the family and the kids. And my mother-in-law was there, and my sister-in-law and my nephew. And so, it was a good feeling. It really was. But then, at the end of the night, when you go back and lay down, it's like, what next? Because it feels good, but I know there's no way they're going to let me walk again. Like, there has to be something that this, district attorney, he's been coming at me, as hard as he can. And I gave the battle to God. So it's his victory, right? I always say. And so we won all this, and you want to go against him, that's fine. But I still have the human thoughts, and so yeah, so I said, okay, I'm gonna take it in. It's a victory. I'm happy, but now I got to prepare again because I know something's coming again.
Yep.
And we knew that.
And I knew it would be unanimous.
Right. And so that was my defense team who actually I got the call from, right? And so now I had to make contact with my appeals attorney too as part of the team. And so I was like, okay, what's next? Kind of like, what do I need to know that I don't know kind of deal, right? So he's like, well, they have so many days to file on you again to try to get you overturned. So we just got to see what they're going to do. Right now, he goes, you're fully exonerated. You're not a felon. He goes, you're not a felon. He goes, just remember that and just wait and let's see what they're going to do. He goes, they may not. He goes, and they may. He goes, we just don't know. But I think we all knew, dealing with this one district attorney, that he was going to take that step.
I was very surprised.
Yes.
And I thought, how odd to want to appeal something that has already been overturned, and then yet you're going after somebody who the amount of like the sentencing you were going to get was, less time and effort than what they were putting in to go after you.
For the record, he has spent over $1 million coming
easy.
after him.
It may be, it's a lot more by now,
but he still has an attorney out there.
So as we went through the appeals process, that's why we were, it went so in our way because you're trialing somebody for something they didn't do. And not only that, they didn't even maintain these records. Then you ask her for a record that you didn't list inside your indictment. So nobody can read your mind. None of us can. And y'all continue through the whole trial. And then actually through the whole trial, there was a lot of civil rights violations. We called for mistrials, I don't know how many times, based on, one instance was the chain of custody on the records of how the district attorney obtained them, and then how they became a one-stop shop. It was like, okay, you became law enforcement investigator and district attorney. How did that happen? Because as a police officer, we're the first line. And then the district attorney, and then the courts come. He just became everything.
He interjected himself.
Yeah, it was crazy. Yeah. And not only that, he had cut our office off 2 months before that when I was in office as a law enforcement agency to go and take cases to him to prosecute. So he cut ties off with our office completely. Yeah, the community doesn't know this.
How can he do that?
And I have documentation. I certified him a letter. I'm like, I call him. I'm like, hey, you can't, just because you don't like me doesn't mean you get to cut me off. We have an office to run. As any law enforcement, we have to work through the district attorney to get to the courts.
Right.
And then we work it, you work it, it gets to the court. You can't just say, okay, constable, you can wear the uniform, that's all you can do. And that's pretty much what they did to me and my deputies. So we no longer had a district attorney's office to operate with.
So what happened to all those cases that were sitting in?
When they went into the search warrant, there was stuff that, they went and took from that office that,
who knows what happened to it?
I don't know what happened to it. I do know that, we protected ourselves the best that we could, for our defense and things like that. But yeah, yep. We also had a case on a head of an office guy here. He wasn't an elected official, but he was an appointed person there. Had a lot of power and authority too, and we had been investigating that case. And that went missing from my office after the raid. Or misplaced, or however you want to say it, because it's not in the office.
And then who's supposed to be accountable for that?
So this person got to walk away free, without the case not being followed through, because during a meeting, and there are witnesses to this, the friendship with the district attorney's office, and it was like, I don't care if he's your friend, if he did something wrong. Whoever, we have a job to do, Yeah.
And I wonder how she feels now knowing that it's been overturned by the appeals court.
Right. I do too.
And that's a huge thing. It is a huge thing to have your, conviction overturned.
Yeah. I think about that a lot. I mean, the day when she read my verdict to me, I mean, she made unfortunately, some biased comments. And, I remember listening to her, and I've gone back to watch the video. And at one point or another, she starts, attacking my character of me as a police officer, and who I was and who she thought I was and things like that. And I thought, first of all, here I have another woman in front of me, just as hard as it was for me to fight for these positions. Because I know if I have it on this side, I'm sure she has it on her side. And you know nothing about, what actually was really, really happening. Your job is to make sure the facts are there, right? It's your position. You're a judge. You should understand that. You're there to make sure that fair justice, is happening in your courtrooms, that people seeking justice are actually receiving that, that our due process, that we're getting all of that, and if there's errors happening, that you stop it before it exceeds into something else that can hurt somebody, which it did hurt me and my family. Right. So, there's a lot of things that happen. And, for you to sit there and make those comments, and then, like you said, to get the news that it was over exonerated, it was just crazy. It was crazy. I mean, we were getting, people telling us, well, the judge, said that she knew you were innocent all the time. And I'm like, yeah, but why didn't you stop it? Forget the innocence. The facts showed that I was innocent. That's what we need to look at. Not that she felt. No, the facts showed it. And so why didn't you not do your job? If anybody failed our constituents, it wasn't me. Right. It was not me. It was other individuals. It was. And I feel bad because, they took advantage of the constituents too. They stole their vote away, and there's no other way I could put it. They stole their vote away from them. They made them believe and led them in a direction that presumed to be something that really didn't exist there. Right. And leading them away from what truly was happening right in front of all of us. We have a few more days. I didn't finish telling you about that. As far as we got the criminal appeal, Eighth Court of Appeals, which how it got transferred out of their county, I have no idea. Because that was the best thing that could have ever happened to me when it went to Eighth Court. So we got that ruling, but now.
Right. And I kind of thought that too. I thought, probably because it was the Eighth Court of Appeals and we got it out of here, that it had a fresh new look.
I think so.
Of someone who wasn't involved or who hadn't been hearing about the story in the news.
Right, because really, if you think about it, it never made national news, and that's what we wanted.
Right.
And it wouldn't make it. It would just stay. That was the plan.
Yeah. But right now we're waiting for. Okay, so we've gone to the Eighth Court of Appeals, we've gone to the Court of Criminal Appeals, and now they have a right now to appeal to the Supreme Court. So, and their deadline is pretty much, the second time I got the news from the Criminal Court of Appeals was the day after my birthday. So we had won again because the Criminal Court of Appeals says, look, no, we're going to uphold this because this is the reason. And so we won again. So now we're going for the third time. Although I'm still fully exonerated, my career is on hold. I can't just go and pick up, go get commissioned and be a police officer again because of everything that I have to go through. And so, they took, several years of my life away that I not get back. My career, my youth.
And ever since the appeals came out and everything, the DA office has been very quiet, which is interesting.
Well, and you're looking at, just where's the publicity on this? Like you're saying, like, why didn't you hype it up? Why didn't you put it all over the stations? Why? I mean,
because they knew all along.
It was personal. We all know, it is personal. And, I said in the commissioners, it's public out there already. It's nothing that, I can't talk about. I mean, I stood before the commissioners and said, why can't we just, it's personal. Put your feelings aside for me and we just get back on track and we do the job that we're supposed to be doing. I mean, why couldn't that have been done, But a reason that God has me on the path, right? And maybe he has plans for me that I don't know about. And I'm still trying to figure it out too, because people are asking, are you going to run again?
Yeah.
Or are you, going to run for the sheriff's office? What are you going to do? And it's just like, right now, I don't think it doesn't go through my mind, because it does. It really does. But, I'm still going through the process. And so I think that, as I come to the complete end of it, that I would be better prepared to make that decision, although I don't rule it out. There's just a lot of things that I still need to finish leading up to that. And the experience that I've gone through, I think now it would put me in a better position, should I seek that office, to be better prepared.
Yes.
It's emotionally, mentally, physically, it did a number. And it doesn't mean that you can't function as a normal person. You can. You just have to find your normal, your new normal, in order to learn how to go back out and do everything you used to do, but just and more cautious, effective,
right,
even loving way. Because when I say loving way, it's like, what if there's somebody else in my position again, that winds up like me?
I mean, this could have gotten so far out of hand, and
the embarrassing moments that we didn't talk about,
right?
It's like,
I mean, no,
taking
and
those
your
tests,
personal, your husband, your kids, it's
your body being invaded
right.
for something you didn't do. It's sad. Like I said, I mentioned I had to go do drug testing, urine testing, and you don't do that kind of stuff in private. And so it's degrading, when you didn't do anything, and then you're, and then when you leave, all the emotions come. Right. It's like, oh my God, like, and you have to go and take a moment to yourself, away from your family. Like I have to take moments away from my whole family, and go through my emotions, and get myself up again, and go. And that's also with a lot of faith too, and praying, and just doing a lot of that, because it's tough. But I want my boys and my girls, and my friends, family, everybody, that even though it's hard, you still keep going.
Oh yeah.
So, yeah.
Thank you for listening to our story today. And remember, True 10 is brought to you by you, our listeners and supporters. You can follow us on Spotify, YouTube, Instagram, and join us on Facebook. And remember, stay safe, San Antonio.